Oscars time is almost upon us, and we've got a fascinating crop of films up for awards this year. We've got some that you might have expected, some kind of more traditionally Oscar bait films like A Complete Unknown. You've also got some really out there passion projects like The Brutalist and Nickel Boy, and you've got a body horror film like The Substance, which is the first time a body horror film has been nominated for Best Picture. So it's a really interesting group of films. So let's start with Best Picture.
Yes.
Obviously the big prize. It's, I think, you know, as always, just 10 nominees, and the crop is quite an interesting one this year. How do you think it kind of stacks up in general to some of the more recent previous years?
I think the crop this year is largely pretty good. I think it's quite a diverse range of films as well. I think the element of crossover between box office success and sort of critical acclaim is maybe a little bit less than previous years. We haven't got a huge film like Oppenheimer in there or Barbie. You've got Wicked that made $700 million, for example, but I think the most acclaimed films are maybe the ones that haven't got the biggest box office footprint that we've seen, but equally it's quite a diverse range of films in terms of genre. You've got things like The Substance, which is a pretty out there horror film, especially for Academy voters, I would imagine. You've got Wicked the musical element to it, and then equally you've got screwball comedy in Anora, you've got a long epic in The Brutalist, Emilia Perez is A Million One Things at Once. So, and equally we've also had numerous favourites in the last 4 months, which I think probably speaks to a pretty wide and open race, I think.
Yeah, I think this is what's really interesting, is that last year you had Oppenheimer, this big juggernaut that was winning all the precursors, and there was never really ever an element of doubt. I think every now and again someone said, oh, maybe Poor Things has a chance, but we all knew, from quite early on, it was going to be Oppenheimer. It was a perfect kind of marriage of that, you know, popular acclaim, a big director kind of getting his due and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, this year it is really close. I think from the start, Anora was something that, you know, people said could end up winning, but then it kind of has jumped between different favourites as all the precursor awards have named their winners. But it looks maybe a bit now like Anora is actually the frontrunner again. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was May, I think, that people first started hearing about Anora, because it won really big at the Cannes Film Festival. It won the top prize there, and then I think it kind of went quite quiet, and I remember hearing in the summer that it was an Oscar frontrunner, but at that time of year it doesn't really mean a great deal. But then it became all about Emilia Perez, which had also premiered in Cannes at the same time as Anora, but had maybe made a little bit less noise. But then I think The Brutalist has sort of picked up quite a lot of momentum, to the point where I think that will probably prevail. To make it sound like a sports team, I guess Anora is kind of peaking at the right time in that respect.
Yeah.
Because it's done well at the smaller award ceremonies, like you say, the sort of precursors. There's lots of guilds in Hollywood, like you know, to do with actors and producers and writers and directors, and it's done really well on that circuit, which could be quite telling, because I would imagine there is probably quite a lot of crossover with Oscar voters and those sorts of associations.
But we can't rule out something like Conclave, which, you know, is probably, from my perspective at least, one of the less inspirational films in there. I think it's very solid, I think it's very entertaining, but I think that could play to its advantage in a sense, in that the Oscars have this preferential ballot, and it's something that is maybe a little less divisive than some of the others. So some of the films, you know, might score really well on some ballots, but then not so well. And whereas I think Conclave has a kind of broad support, which could end up seeing it kind of across the line to winning it. It's not won a great deal in the precursor stuff, which I think is, you know, leading people to think that it probably is slightly out of the race. But I would say keep an eye out on it, because you never know. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised to see it doing well at the Oscars this year, because as you say, I think it's quite a popular movie, even if it's not necessarily winning these things. And equally, when you look at its cast, and you've got Ralph Fiennes, you've got Stanley Tucci, you've got Isabel Rossellini, John Lithgow, you know, those are quite kind of establishment actors, certainly in Hollywood. So I could see that doing well for the reasons you say, that it's unlikely to be disliked, I think. And yeah, like, you know, as we say, things like The Substance, I think people kind of go either way on it. And equally with something like The Brutalist, that's a 3.5 hour long epic movie that people are probably going to have quite strong opinions on. So, you know, you're likely to have that at the top of your ballot, or maybe not on it at all, whilst I think that we've also seen a lot of winners in the past, like that was the prevailing narrative with Green Book, for example, when it won, that, you know, it had done well because of the preferential ballot, where it might have come second in a lot of them, but ultimately that's what prevails. So yeah, maybe Conclave an outside bet. I'm still not sure I see it. I think maybe Anora might be a slightly more likely case for that to happen.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I still think it is between Anora and The Brutalist.
Personal preference, I think, would be Nickel Boys, which I think is, of all the films in there, I think it's the most bold, the most audacious. Audacious is the word that a lot of people have used to describe Emilia Perez, and it's a big kind of blend of genres that you might not expect to go together. And I guess it is audacious, but in my view, it fails at being audacious.
Yeah, I would agree.
Whereas I think Nickel Boys, the form of it, it's all from this point of view approach, which sounds, and to be honest, even the first 5 or 10 minutes while I was watching it, I was like, I don't think there's like, as kind of British audiences, I think the thing you're most used to seeing that style of is like Peep Show, and so it kind of that comes to your mind. I think, how is this?
I was getting motion sickness first time I saw it because I was sitting too close to the front of the screen.
Yeah.
But even then, it is something that is really quite bold and, as you say, audacious and something very different from a technical side of things. But yeah, that film's brilliant, and I don't think it has necessarily got the love that it deserves from this year's nominations. It's got another nomination, I think, in script category, adapted screenplay, because it's based on the novel. But equally, it's from Colson Whitehead, who's won a ton of prizes in the literary world. He's already had his work adapted for film and TV. We've seen things like Moonlight go on to win Best Picture. So I don't know. I was, I suppose, a little bit surprised to not see it get a bit more love, but equally I think its inclusion in the Best Picture nominees is really great.
Exactly. I think it's one of those cases where its nomination is kind of like a win for it, and I think that will get a lot more eyes on it.
Totally.
And because most people that I've spoken to have seen it have been really wowed by it, and like just how dramatically overpowering it is, emotionally overpowering.
The effect of it at the end is phenomenal. Like it is really overwhelming.
There's this brilliant kind of montage that I mean, it would be a lovely winner. I don't think it's going to happen. But yeah, so I think we're thinking it's probably The Brutalist, maybe Anora. Would that be your thinking? Okay, so now we're going to talk about Best Actor, which I think is a really interesting category in that, like a lot of the time, what you've got is basically, on the one hand, some really good impersonations of, maybe that's a bit reductive to call them impersonations, but, performances based on very well-known public figures, in Sebastian Stan playing Donald Trump and Timothée Chalamet playing Bob Dylan. And then on the other hand, you've got these brand new characters brought to life by, I'm thinking of Adrian Brody as Laszlo Toth in The Brutalist, a kind of really powerhouse of a performance of a brand new character that really goes through an incredible arc over 3.5 hours. So it's a strange point of comparison, really, to compare those two types of performances. But which one do you think the Academy are going to go for?
I think it's hard to say with certainty, but I would say that it looks like it's going to go towards Brody.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it's a sort of powerhouse performance. But I think, similar to what you were just saying, there are kind of two archetypes of performance there that the Academy traditionally and historically really like, in that we've seen numerous ones down the years of Best Actor Oscars going to, Rami Malek for playing Freddie Mercury, or broadening it out to other real-life people. Gary Oldman wins for playing Winston Churchill. That is very much, it's the kind of thing that people call Oscar bait, really. Yeah. And fundamentally, playing a real person, I think, is maybe easier to judge for a lot of people because, you called it impersonation. There's quite an easy reference point to see how good a performance is purely from likeness.
That's really impressive. That's exactly how they do it.
He sounds like Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Adrian Brody in The Brutalist is interesting because that is a huge performance where the merits of it are probably quite obvious and not very subtle, because this is a guy who, his character has to suffer a lot and he has to go through a lot. You talk about this huge arc in a 3.5 hour long film, and it's historical, it's epic in every sense. And so, that kind of speaks more to winners like Daniel Day-Lewis and for There Will Be Blood, or even Brody's own win for The Pianist around the turn of the century. Between the two frontrunners of Brody and Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, it's funny because if Timothée Chalamet were to win this year, he would be the youngest Best Actor winner since Adrian Brody for The Pianist, and yet it's quite likely that that will not happen because he'll be beaten by Adrian Brody of all people. So there's a nice kind of circularity to that, I guess.
Yeah, I mentioned Sebastian Stan at the top, and I think what's interesting about, on the one hand, I think his performance as Donald Trump is genuinely good, and it really does well to avoid the pitfalls of a performance of Donald Trump, in that you kind of just imagine it as a really broad pantomime character, and I think he actually does go beyond that. And
it could have been a bit Saturday Night Live, couldn't it?
Exactly.
But he does very well.
And I think that's commendable. But what I would say, as well as that, is I actually think it's not even Sebastian Stan's best performance of the year, which kind of speaks to how good a year he's had. I thought I would have liked to have seen him nominated for A Different Man, which I think is just a more interesting performance. Yeah. Not to take away from The Apprentice and from his Donald Trump performance, but I just think that would have been a more exciting nomination.
The Apprentice is an interesting one because I didn't see him getting nominated for that, because the very nature of the fact that he plays Donald Trump, and around the time that film was coming out, and also the subject matter of the film, and it covers an earlier period of his life, so he's sort of kind of formative years. I think he's in his 20s during the film, kind of making it as a real estate baron, I guess. And I think there was quite a lot of controversy around that film, and it looked like, certainly Sebastian Stan has given interviews about it, that it was difficult to find people who wanted to promote it in the press. Like, he couldn't find another actor who wanted to do Actors on Actors with Variety with him, for example. So I was kind of surprised, actually, to see that in there, even if I do agree that it was the wrong film. Otherwise, I think I was quite pleased to see Coleman Domingo in there.
Yes.
It almost feels like an annual
it's two
now.
Nominations in a row for him now. He was nominated for Rustin last year, and I think, similar to that one, he's probably going to fall short. Yeah. But I think he is such a charismatic screen presence, and whatever kind of role he's playing, we've seen him play bad guys, we've seen him play good guys, we've seen him play people who fall somewhere in between that most of the time, and I think he's always got the same charisma, but he brings a slightly different style to each of those performances. I think he's just incredibly watchable. Yeah. So I have no doubt that he, I say no doubt, but I think I wouldn't bet against him getting an Oscar at some point in the not too distant future. I don't think it's going to be his year.
I feel like in a few years' time we could be sitting here talking about a big movie where Coleman Domingo is the front runner. But I do see it being Brody, and I think that performance it's pretty undeniable. It is really what propels that film for so long, and it's such a big runtime, and you're asking so much of the audience. And equally, he has to do a Hungarian accent for over 200 minutes, but he sort of sustains that level so well that I think it is really impressive, and I can't really see people looking beyond it.
I'll just very quickly mention Ralph Fiennes, who nominated for Conclave. I think it's a good performance. I still think his best performance, and in fact an incredibly overlooked Academy, he didn't get a nomination for The Grand Budapest Hotel a decade ago, which I think is the best comedy performance of the 21st century, possibly.
He's brilliant.
So it's nice to see him nominated, given that he was snubbed then. I mean, it's not his first nomination, but I don't think it's quite as grabbing a performance. I think he's got some great moments in that film. He gives a big speech about doubt and the role of doubt in Catholicism and all that kind of stuff, which is really impressive, but I just don't think he has as many standout moments. So I think we're both in agreement that Adrian Brody should win and will win.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So now Best Actress, which I think is one of the more hotly contested races, but we do have a narrative emerging around Demi Moore for her role in The Substance, which again would be right off the bat a very unique win for someone playing the lead role in a unashamed body horror film. Can you see her winning it? Do you think she will win? What do you think?
I do see her winning it. I can't really at this point look beyond her in that respect. I think Mikey Madison for Anora has a chance, and quite a good chance. She's brilliant in that film, but I think that Hollywood loves a comeback story, and that is a narrative that is too difficult to overcome, I think, if you're up against somebody like Demi Moore. We saw it in the Best Act category a couple of years ago with Brendan Fraser and The Whale, for example. And I think also, aside from the fact that The Substance is an out-and-out, as you say, body horror movie, it was also quite a brave role for Demi Moore to take on, because fundamentally, her character in that film is supposedly a sort of washed-up has-been who's now on television, but used to be this, fabled actress who was really successful. And so I think for Demi Moore to take it on, given what people have been saying about her own career, there was, maybe an element of self-consciousness there and lack of ego, I guess. So I think she was great to take it on. I think it would be a really exciting win, even if I personally don't love The Substance as a film. But I just think the comeback narrative is just too difficult to go against.
I think her speech at the Golden Globes all but secured her the award. I'm not saying she was cynically doing that speech to get the award, but I think it was just a moment where the industry kind of noticed this is like a massive moment, and her talking about how she was told that she was just a popcorn actress and all this kind of stuff. And as much as we can pretend that narratives don't feed into the Oscars, it is as much about the narratives as it is about the performances themselves. And as it happens, I think she gives a brilliant performance. I'm not saying that that's taking away from it, but I do think often what you're looking for is a great performance, but also this great narrative behind it. And I think of all the nominees in this category, hers is the story which kind of most seems suited to this big win. I think Mikey Madison in Anora is brilliant, and she is, absolutely at the centre of that film throughout the whole runtime. That's maybe one thing that you could, it would probably be unfair to take that away from Demi Moore, that she is basically sharing a lead role with Margaret Qualley. Whereas Anora is, the beating heart of that film throughout.
Completely.
But I think, I think they're both good performances. I think it is going to come down to the narrative.
It's interesting as well to see Mikey Madison in with a shot, because converse to we talk about Demi Moore being a comeback story, that maybe overshadows the fact that if Mikey Madison were to win, I think that would probably be the closest out-and-out comedy winner we've seen in a while, because the Academy historically kind of looks down a little bit on comedies. You don't get that many nominees. I think Anora as a film has sort of managed to position itself as a kind of prestige indie comedy because it's got that sort of screwball element to it. But I think that would be one of the funniest performances to win a Best Actor or Actress Oscar in a while.
One other outsider who I think still has a slight chance, I think it's a slight chance, but it's Fernanda Torres, who has the lead role in I'm Still Here. And there's a great story here as well, because she is the second Brazilian woman to be nominated for Best Actress, and the first was her own mother, who also plays an older version of her character in I'm Still Here. So that's quite a nice story. But she's also brilliant in that film. It's a very emotional film. It's a very emotional performance. But I think I just don't know if it's really kind of broken the ground in the way that the other two have in terms of getting that public support.
Well, she won the Golden Globe, but I think that maybe might have been a bit of a false dawn for some people thinking she's going to win Best Actress at the Oscars, because the Golden Globe do those dual categories where you have musical or comedy and drama at the same time. So I would say that, I think she has a very outside chance. Equally, a lot of noise has been made in Brazil about how good she is in that film, and Brazilian people online are really, really enthusiastic about that film. And I think in many ways, you said this to me before, that it's quite a conventional film in some ways, and if it were in English, I think it would be a very conventional Oscar contender. But she is really remarkable in that film, and that thing with her mother later on is it's actually really, really well done, clever, because you're watching it and her own mother obviously looks a lot like her, so she's actually a perfect choice to play an older version of her.
In terms of the other nominees, obviously there's been a lot of noise around Carla Sofia Gascon, who at first it was a great story. She was the first trans actress to be nominated. And it's all gone a bit sour, should we say? Like these tweets have been unearthed from not so long ago, in which various bigoted statements were made. I think we can fairly say, and it does seem that she is not considered part of the race anymore.
It'll be interesting to see if she even goes to the ceremony, because I think Netflix have said that they won't pay for her to go to the ceremony. They're not endorsing that, but I guess if she's a nominee, she's probably still got the right to be there. I wouldn't really know the rules on that, but I can't see her winning this category that she's nominated in, obviously, but I think it will be interesting to see as well just how much that whole storm around her has affected Emilia Perez's chances in the other categories of film and director and supporting actress, etc.
I think really the best performance that was overlooked for me was Marianne Jean-Baptiste in Hard Truths, who gives an absolutely brilliant performance, which is hilarious, tragic, and just very empathetic, despite her playing a seemingly horrible and unlikable character. And I think it's another of those performances that could have just been a bit too broad, could have been too unbelievable or, just played just for laughs. And I think she's absolutely brilliant in that film. And I cannot think of a good reason why she's not been.
I wonder if it's maybe Hard Truth is an extremely British movie in many ways, and as funny as it is, it's also quite bleak.
Yeah.
And a lot of the humour is quite dark humour as well. It's classic Mike Leigh in that respect. But yeah, I do wonder if maybe that's what hurt it a little bit.
There is one British actress who has been nominated, who's Cynthia Erivo, for her turn in Wicked.
Yes.
I think we're similar in this respect, that we weren't blown away by Wicked itself,
Yes.
but I do actually think the performances were good in it. I think she was really good. I don't think she's going to win this category, but
No.
I'm not too annoyed about her nomination, I wouldn't say.
No, and I think she really, for whatever you think about Wicked, and as I say, it's not really my cup of tea, I guess. But I think her performance in that is completely undeniable, and especially at the end of the film, which is also a really long film, where if you have any familiarity with the musical as well, you're kind of waiting for Defying Gravity to come in, and you're waiting for all these big musical numbers, and there's a lot of pressure on that, and she absolutely nails it, and she really, really lands those moments. So Wicked was not necessarily made with Oscars in mind. It's made 700 million at the box office or something. So at the end of the day, it's been a huge hit. It's been really popular with fans. So I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, and don't rule her out being back in the race next year when Wicked for Good rolls around, which is just a year away. So,
yeah, part 2.
Yeah.